Buenas and half a day to our listeners on Guam and in the CNMI. It's now time for Total Health right here on Joy FM Radio, where your questions get answered by health professionals. If you have any health-related questions, we would love to hear from you. Call your questions and comments in at 472-1111 or text or WhatsApp 686-9999. If you're in the CNMI, please call 323-1113. Welcome everybody to Total Health.
Hi and welcome to Total Health Live. My name is Rose Trina, and in the studio today we have Elena Taneva, nurse practitioner, and Bethany Helm, psychiatric PA. Elena, welcome.
Hi, Rose Trina. I'm so happy to be back, and today we're going to tackle one of our sessions about emotional health. We talk about emotional health and we talk about things that usually we don't like to talk about them. We talk about them openly in our radio show. Well, today we select a very important topic, and it is about sexual health, or what is the emotional side of the sexual life in women and men. So we were thinking, who are we gonna invite for this important topic? Because certainly we need somebody that has expertise in that topic. And Rosina, it was your pickup. You said, why don't we invite Bethany? And we are so happy that Bethany happened to be here. Bethany Helm, she has been before in our radio show, and she has been speaking very openly about important topics such as domestic violence. Mm-hmm. And so we have Bethany Helm here today, all the way from Colorado. Hi, Bethany. Welcome to our radio show today.
Half a day. And I'm really happy that I'm able to say half a day.
Half a day.
Because I feel like on a daily basis, where I'm at currently in Colorado, my natural response is always half a day. And no one's going to understand me. So it's really nice to be back in my island home. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, Bethany, and when I asked her how should I present you, she said, just say that I'm an honorary chamorro. And I feel the same way, Bethany. Sometimes I love the culture and I love the people in Guam so much that sometimes I consider myself more chamorro than the chamorros. But of course, I can be wrong. But I really, really like to call myself as well as you as an honorary chamorro. Well, so since we like the culture so much and since we care about the health of the people in Guam, we're going to deal with that important topic. And so we're going to talk about sex in a plain terms. We'll talk about the good, the bad, the ugly. And of course, we're going to deal with the pandemic and the sexual addiction that is going on around, not only in Guam, around the world. And so we're very privileged that Bethany can give us more insight about that. So when we talk about sexual health, can we say, Bethany, that sexual health actually affect our emotional health or our mental health? What would you say?
I would say 100% it's intricately connected. You can't have one without the other.
Right. You can't have one apart from the other. And recently we're seeing a surge in people having emotional issues. They have also sexual issues and mental issues. And we can't deal with one without the other. So that's why we would like to discuss it in plain terms. Well, before we jump into healthy and unhealthy behaviors, when it comes about sex, we are following the 13 weeks of emotional health written by Jennifer Switzer. And she starts the book with a story that when she was a young teenager, she burned the house. I don't know if that happened to you, but I have been responsible for a big fire. I used to work in Hotel Hilton, and I was one of the beauticians. I left the electric blanket, in one of the studios. And next thing I know is that I was called by the fire brigade and by the hotel manager telling me that all the Hilton guests had to be evacuated from the hotel because it became a very big thing. Nothing burned, but the smoke that came out of this burning blanket was a very, a big experience. And so I have experienced to be in the midst of seeing, the fire brigade people coming or the guests being evacuated. And I know that sex in the same way, when it is taken out of, the fire, like the fire out of the oven, can cause this burning sensation. And so too much, too soon, too fast can burn not somebody's only spirituality, but also emotional health and mental health. Bethany, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. And I think that it's interesting to talk about this particular topic in that manner, because I find that there is such a disconnect between what people understand as healthy sexual health versus unhealthy. And so I think there's a need to kind of define that a little bit more.
Right. And also, what is a real sex versus porn sex, because since the whole society is kind of exposed to porn sex, somehow that puts a lot of pressure on people, that they have to be certain body shapes or they have to perform in a certain way, and puts very unrealistic expectations that certainly messes up with people's mind, emotions, and of course health. Some story behind that. We know who Eros is. We know that when we talk about erotic love, I just don't want to omit that part of the story. So Eros was a god from the Greek mythology, and his mother was Venus. So Venus, as a goddess, she really hated one mortal woman. Her name was Psyche, like Psyche. And she was very moral, and she hated her because she was just different. And she asked her son Eros to throw a spell on her, with his darts, and that he may really curse her in some way, but he fell in love with her. And so he fell in love with her, and he asked his mom if he can elevate Psyche to be a goddess. And it can be told today that, in a way, many people, since this is one of the most powerful experiences one can go through, it really just brings you to heaven, like a blissful experience that people would like to have more and more and more from it. And we know, being outside of the boundaries where that can lead to. So why sometimes when, you're led by passion, by all the lust and, sexual desire, why people, instead of finding themselves in paradise, Bethany, they kind of find themselves in hell, if I can use those terms in that way?
Yeah. And I really think it goes back to the root of, we truly have lost the understanding of what true intimacy looks like. We have grown up more now in a culture where sex equals what you see in Hollywood. Sex equals what you see on the screen. Sex equals what you associate with pornography in general. And so there's that inherent disconnect that, unfortunately, the newer generations don't know anything but that. But generations such as myself and older than myself, we didn't grow up with that 24-hour inundation of what social media wants to teach you is considered sexual health. All right. So we do have that distinguishing factor, whereas the current and the younger generations, they're not able to distinguish between the two. And so it requires purposeful education, purposeful communication about it, because otherwise they're simply being indoctrinated, for lack of a better word, of what media wants you to understand sexual health to be.
Right. It is very sad that our reality is so twisted that we kind of have, swerved away, and we don't actually know anymore what the real reality about sexual health is. The word pornography comes from the Greek word which means porny, or a prostitute, and describing an act of a prostitute. As you said, Bethany, nowadays we're not only writing about those things like in during the Greek time, we are are watching, we are available, we are able to see those on an ongoing basis, as you said, 24 hours. So you have that graphic, not only for certain people or selected people, but for the average man. Anybody can have an access to that.
Oh, yeah. It's at the fingertips of everyone now, right?
Right.
It's immediate access. And I was reviewing some statistics on pornography that I kind of wanted to share with you guys a little bit. But before that, you did a good job with talking about the definition itself. And I wanted to read part of Webster's definition of pornography. It says, printed or visual material containing the explicit description or display of sexual organs or activity that is intended to stimulate erotic, which you just talked about. It's intended to stimulate erotic behavior rather than emotional feelings. And I like that definition because it's true. Pornography is very much drawing a line of separation. It's detaching you from the emotional feelings that should be involved with healthy sexual behavior, and it's simply focusing on the erotica.
Right. We didn't tell our listeners, but we also have an anonymous guest today in our studio. And so he preferred to stay anonymous, but we would like to have his input because we know that it is everywhere, but we don't know as much how, spread it is, even among, schools in United States and in Guam. We can only speculate, and we can also relate to that, that we not always listen to our parents, but also we can't also assume that our children are very innocent angels until they prove us otherwise. And so we would like to have an input from an insider, somebody that lives at that era, this age, and is surrounded by that. Before that, Bethany, I also have some statistics. Maybe you can, share more with us. But the average age of the first exposure to internet pornography is actually 11 years.
Oh, that's young.
Exactly.
Very young. And then 93% of the boys and 62% of the girls are exposed to internet pornography before the age of 18. Therefore, we will need the input from our anonymous guest. But about that right after the break.
And that's the music, so we'll go ahead and go to the break. If you have a question and you want to call it in, on Guam, you can call us at 671-472-1111. That's 671-472-1111. In the CNMI, call us at 670-323-1113. That's 670-323-1113. You can also send us a message via text, via WhatsApp, or Signal at 671-686-9999. That's 671-686-9999. It's free from the CNMI. Don't go anywhere. Total Health Live will be right back after the break.
If someone asked your family or those you work with to write your biography, how would it turn out? Would it be uplifting, or would you want to edit a few of the chapters? Here's the good news. Your story can change drastically, no matter how bad the history. Ask God to come in and take control. Ask His forgiveness. Allow Him to change you from the inside out so people will read the story God is writing through you every day. An encouraging message from Family Friendly Radio.
Si Joe Moasi, and thanks for listening to Total Health on Joy FM. We want to hear from you. Call in with your health-related questions at 472-1111 in Guam or in the CNMI. The number to call is 323-1113. Text or WhatsApp us at 686-9999. And now, back to the show.
Hi, welcome back to Total Health Live.
Yes, so we are continuing with our discussion about sexual health, and we left off when we were talking about the statistics and how spread pornography it is in the schools nowadays. Among the U.S. high school students surveyed in 2017, and this is 5 years ago, 40% reported that they have already had a sexual intercourse stimulated by pornography, and 10% of them reported that they have had more than one sexual partner because of that. And so I would like to ask our guest, because we can only speculate, we can only imagine, but how prevalent is that among, school students? And what would you say? Is there a peer pressure that everybody should conform to that, sexual behavior, or not really?
I wouldn't say that there's a peer pressure, but I would say that it's very normalized, which isn't a good thing because it's very normalized among teens and high schoolers and people around my age. So it's not something that's absurd to hear about or that people talk about, and it's not something that you would like bat an eye about. So I would say it's pretty normalized, but I don't feel like people are like peer pressured into it. I feel like it's more of just a self-choice and it's just normalized. So maybe because of the fact that it's normalized, people could be peer pressured into it.
Oh, I see. I do have had several patients that, young girls that, they confided to me that if they are not engaged in a behavior like that, they consider that maybe that's homosexual, because they are not, exposing themselves. They're not talking about those things, and they start questioning their own sexual identity. And of course, I'm sure, Bethany, you have more stories to share with us. It certainly, confuses the young people, even though it sounds normal. We know that even people practicing that for years, they still have some effect on their emotions coming from that. It is like a mixture between shame and anger and arousal, and it seems that it is difficult even to shake off from those normal feelings in a long term. Am I right?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, my experience is obviously different than a lot of other people's, going to a Christian school all my life, but I feel like that also doesn't make too much of a difference. But I can see how in other people it could, if it's not normalized to you, then you could be like taking a look at yourself and be like, is there something wrong with me, or am I doing something wrong because I feel like everybody else is doing this and maybe I should be doing this too. But I feel like it's just not everybody does that, but yeah.
I'm kind of curious, what is considered normalized? Like when you refer to pornography being normalized, in what way are you referring to it?
I mean, I'm just referring to it in like a jokingly manner. Like people can joke about it and just bring it up in conversation as a joke. That's just from my experience, like, because most people that I know aren't like super open about their intimate lifestyle and what they do behind closed doors, because that's usually their business. But what I'm trying to say is there can be a lot of joking manner about it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
How about in the way that individuals might use social media with pornography? I have patients who kind of get caught up in it via very explicit selfies that, either they take of themselves or someone else will take of them, and then it winds up being circulated. Now, and I'm kind of curious whether or not young adults, young people understand that as pornographic content, or if it's just something that is swept under the rug, not really talked about, glossed over.
I mean, I feel like there's been a lot more of things like that have been brought up over the past few years, or even before I noticed it, that's been a lot more normalized, that people just don't really think about it being pornography, which, matter of fact, it is, but it's just so normalized and common now that people just don't view it as pornography, and they view it as just something that you see on the daily basis.
Do you agree with that statistic that Elena had read earlier, that the average age of first exposure is 11 years old?
I mean, I don't know from everybody's experience, but I feel like that's a little bit young, but at the same time, it's probably getting younger and younger every year, because obviously the world is just getting worse every year. So I believe this statistic.
Yeah. And Elena, I think he alluded to something that is important for us to talk about also. And he kind of mentioned that he felt his experience was a little bit different having gone to a Christian school.
Right.
But it's still there.
It is still.
Pornography does not recognize boundaries.
Correct.
It crosses all boundaries and tears them all down. And I kind of wanted to share, I want to share one stat with you. And then I think do we have a call coming in?
I can check.
Okay.
Let me check.
So listen to this. So it says 68% of church-going men actually view pornography on a regular basis. 68%. Does that sound pretty high to you?
It does sound very high to me, and I also even have a statistic that even 54% of Christian pastors admitted.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, I had that one also. And the reality is, 68% viewing pornography on a regular basis, I actually don't think that's very high. I think that is very reflective of the silent epidemic that we have going on. And just for kicks, I'm going to kind of throw out a question for our listeners. And first one to call in and get closest to the answer, we'll have a surprise giveaway for you. But listen to this. So the pornography industry, their total annual revenue is greater than the NFL, the NBA, and the MLB combined. All right. It's also greater than all of the revenues of the main TV networks like ABC, CBS, and NBC. So any guesses as to what the annual revenue of pornography is? And Elena, you can guess too, but I really want our listeners to call in. You have a random guess so far?
Yes, we do, and we are taking some calls at the moment. So carry on, Bethany.
Oh, I was asking if did you hear the statistic that I had read about the annual revenue of pornography?
Yes, I have, and I actually
Any
kind
guess?
of know the numbers. Right?
All right, so I want we'll wait for a listener to hopefully call in. I want someone to give us a guess on what they anticipate the annual revenue of pornography to be, and we'll have a giveaway for that individual who hopefully gets pretty close to it. But yeah, back to the problem with it being quite prevalent in our churches. It obviously penetrates the home, right? Because that's the nucleus.
Right. Well, did we get, Rosie, the answer how much most likely will be the revenue coming out of pornography daily?
I'm so sorry. Could you ask me that
Oh,
question
no, that's
again?
all right. That's all right. Okay, Bethany, I don't think we're going to get any small
It's okay.
amount
We'll
of
talk.
number.
We'll
Yes.
talk about it at the end of the program. So we have the whole hour for anyone to call in if they want to wager a guess as to what the annual revenue of pornography is.
Oh, okay. That's what it was. We actually did have a caller. Not for that specific reason.
Mm-hmm.
She said it's okay for me to share this, but she was saying that when her brother was 9, he actually found pornography in the house, and it was his dad's stash.
Mm-hmm.
And she found it at 13, and it was her mother's stash.
Mm-hmm.
And she just wanted to say that you maybe might not need the internet sometimes parents bring it into the home and the kids find it.
Absolutely. And that was the gold standard initially, like before internet. It was typically, the Playboy magazines, any kind of racy publication, but that's initially how it started coming into the home. Now with the novelty of the internet, which is not so novel anymore, now it's simply at everyone's fingertips and accessible anytime, any day, and easily hidden. You used to have to stash a pile of magazines under your mattress. That's not the case anymore. We walk around with it in our pockets, on our phones, in our hands.
Right, and I'll continue with more statistics, Bethany. More revenue than Microsoft, Google, Amazon, eBay, Yahoo, and Netflix combined. So if you can imagine that number, it's more than all those businesses combined.
Yeah, so let's ask our special guest, any idea how much annual revenue pornography industry generates in a year?
I would guess 136 billion.
136 billion.
I think he's close because our statistic is, from 2017. So
yeah, it's actually 97 billion. And of that amount, the United States is responsible for 16 billion of that.
Yeah, and also, United States has the most porn stars in the world. Contributes to that, and the statistic goes even uglier. It says that there are 68 million daily search engines requests for porn. Unfortunately, 116,000 of them are for child pornography. 90% of those that are like 16 years old have already viewed porn. Every second, $3,075 are spent on pornography. 28,500 internet users view porn every second. Every 39 minutes, somebody makes a movie, on pornography. And it goes on. There are 4.2 million porn websites. Am I missing something else, Bethany?
No, I mean, we can go on and on and on with the statistics, right? So I have, 47% of families, they report that pornography is actual problem within their home. And it increases marital infidelity by 300%.
Wow.
Which is huge. I think, after our break, it might be interesting to talk about good, healthy versus unhealthy sexual health and behaviors, and what's actually going on in our minds, right? In our brains, what's going on with healthy sexual behavior, so then we can easily identify when there's a counterfeit, like pornography.
So that's the music, and we're going to go ahead and go to a break real quick. Thank you to our callers. We did get a couple callers just in this last segment. If you want to call in, you can call us on Guam at 671-472-1111. That's 671-472-1111. From the CNMI, you can call us at 670-323-1113. That's 670-323-1113. Send us a message via text, via WhatsApp, or Signal at 671-686-9999. That's 671-686-9999. It's free from the CNMI. Total Health Live is only going on a break, so stay tuned, and we'll be right back after this short break.
It's just a fact of life. Tires wear out. If your car isn't driving straight, the tires wear unevenly, and you get that weird pull to the left. And sometimes you do too. The wear and tear of life can put a weird pull on you. Here at Joy FM, we can help you through those crooked days when you feel like you're drifting a little. Where the rubber meets the straight and narrow road, that's where you'll find us, ready to help.
Welcome back. You're listening to Total Health on Joy FM. Call in with your health-related questions to 472-1111 in Guam. If you live in the CNMI, we want to hear from you too. Call 323-1113 or text or WhatsApp us at 686-9999. And now, here's more Total Health.
Hi, and welcome back to Total Health Live. My name is Rose Trina Elidoc. In the studio today, we have Elena Taneva, nurse practitioner, and Bethany Helm, psychiatric PA. And in case you're just tuning in, we're actually talking about sexual health today. But it's sexual health in the sense that, I guess, how it affects our emotional health and our mental health as well. And before we went to break, we were actually talking about statistics.
Yeah, we can go on statistics, but I agree with you, Bethany. It's time for us to say, what actually the real sexual life was, God has intended for us to be. It's not that God is a joy killer and God wants you to have a mundane sexual life with no excitement. We forget that God has created sexual life himself. And the book, Social Context of Marriage from Richard Hardy actually shows the statistics in which it talks about a relationship-driven sex and what are the benefits from it. That partners' level of sexual desire tend to become more congruent and stronger. It's not that God is a joy killer and he has no fantasy how it needs to be, but he has designed it so it can deepen the relationship and the emotions between, married couple. Then both partners can experience more, orgasmic ability, and both partners are more inclined to agree on the amount of sex and methods used. So as we can go on different, views about what real life versus a porn sexual life can be, I would just like to quickly go through the stages of sexual life. And there is the excitement phase when, during love making, when there are physical changes that happen to our bodies and prepares the body for an intercourse. And actually, this is the time when the oxytocin starts being produced. And this is the bonding hormone, which actually encourages the generosity and the empathy. Then the lovers, they enter into a plateau phase, or when the two bodies become one, then muscles get tense and the heart and the breathing rate increases. After that, we're going to the orgasmic phase, which involves, of course, rhythmic contractions and a sharp peak of dopamine and oxytocin. And those are this is the moment and the experience that certainly is one of the most powerful experiences you can have on earth. And the intensity of pleasure, it's really hard to describe, and people say hard to forget. And it seems that for a moment in time, you're just kind of detached in your own time. The world is a different place for you. But then you're going to the resolution phase, which actually returns the organs to their normal initial size, and then the dopamine levels start to drop. So, Bethany, before I go and start talking about how those hormones affect us, you would agree that the way that sexual life is perceived, actually it can affect the brain. I know that you do mapping for different health conditions, and that the brain activity is certainly differently portrayed, even on a PET scan, when you see somebody using heroin or cocaine or a normal brain, and then someone that views pornography. Then there are even structural changes in your brain that happens as a result of those hormones activities that makes it so difficult, and at times very difficult to reverse. It makes actually pornography into an addiction. But before I go further, would you like to add something?
No, I think you're on the right track, in regards to the mapping, the brain mapping, and what we see when we study the brains of drug users versus the brains of pornography users, they're not that different.
Not that different, right? No, actually, much worse. Like when you look at the brain of somebody using pornography, you're like, wow, how that can be reversed. It's so much more difficult. And I will just mention a few things about it. So most researchers are aware nowadays of the phenomenon that's called dopamine hangover. Once the excitement is over, actually, if the oxytocin hasn't been released or there is no this bonding hormones between like strangers when they do a casual sex, actually that dopamine hangover can lead to an aggression.
Well, yeah, and it sets you up for addictive behaviors. Because I think what a lot of people don't understand is pornography is not just, one-time indifference, but it leads, by nature, it leads to a sexual addiction. So you can be addicted to pornography, but that in turn leads to a deeper sexual addiction that opens a whole other can of worms that we're probably not going to discuss here today. But I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the pathophysiology that you touched on with the release of the neurotransmitters during healthy sexual interactions. And what we're really talking about is mainly dopamine, oxytocin, and endorphins, okay? And you're mentioning a lot of the dopamine because that dopamine is that's where we get our pleasure sense, right? It's like it's when you eat an ice cream cone and it tastes so good, or you learn something new that is stimulating to your brain and you want to know more. Gambling also produces dopamine. Your first hit of heroin or meth, anytime you take a hit, is going to release a rush of dopamine. Same thing with sexual intimacy. That dopamine is released, and that's a good thing because you have the oxytocin and the other endorphins to balance it out and to provide resolution. With the oxytocin, the oxytocin is primarily used for reproductive purposes. However, on the emotional side, it is released when we experience empathy for an individual, when we're building trust, when we're doing any kind of relationship building, even hugging. So when you're hugging, you're actually releasing oxytocin. It's that warm, fuzzy feeling that you have. And it's all good, but it helps to provide resolution to the dopamine rush that you wind up getting. Same thing with the endorphins. We call those kind of like our happiness boosters, right? We also use endorphins to help us manage stressful situations. Those endorphins cause us to relax, which is, again, part of that resolution to healthy sexual intimacy. So anytime these neurotransmitters are overreacting in ways that are not holding each other in checks and balances, then you get very unhealthy attachments and unhealthy behaviors. And what we're finding is with the use of pornography and also just simply sexual intimacy outside of God's design of marriage, individuals who kind of go through this ebb and flow outside of those boundaries that we're created to exist within, they eventually find it harder and harder to build and maintain long-term relationships, which again is like a domino effect and continues to lead to the personal breakdown and also family breakdowns.
Yes, you're saying that correct. And we know that the way the dopamine system works is like the more you have from it, next time it will not be satisfactory. You need to have more and you have to have more. And it's like this is, you described very well the path to addiction.
Yeah, you're constantly chasing that next high.
Right.
And there's always a next high, even for sexual behavior.
And this is due to a protein that it is, that we accumulate. It's called delta phos-B protein that accumulates in the reward circuit, and it causing a numbness of the pleasure. Actually, that has been created by God, and God wants us constantly to seek for new things and explore new things. But we somehow have, have adopted it into our addictive system, and we certainly seek more pleasure, more of that. And we know once you start this type of a lust, behavioral practices, it's never enough. You want to try this, and you want to try different things, and you want to try different partners, and it's going on and going on, and you never know how it's gonna end. Actually, Bethany, if you don't mind, I will just share a few things. For example, Hitler said that he never experienced real love in his life. He said, prostitutes took over my life. I've never truly loved a woman. So if you are going through that and you've never experienced a real love, it can end up very bad. Actually, most of the serial rapists and most of the serial killers, they admit that they have started it from pornography. Even Stalin, he was very madly in love with his wife, but when she died, he said, if I can't have love in this life, then I can do anything I want, and I can kill whoever I want, and I can sleep with whoever I want. This is how, a monster gets created, somebody that can destroy whole societies just by not attending to those basic human relationships in a proper way.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because studies also show that the human brain is arrested at the moment where you start diving into pornography. So, for example, if you start viewing and partaking of pornography at the age of 14 or 12, whatever it is, your brain ceases. It kind of goes on a pause, so to speak. And so basically we have a whole world full of adolescents running around in adult bodies, right? Who have never matured past that age where the pornography has taken over.
Right. There is a pause there, a serious pause. I actually heard a physician speaking about mental health in the United States, and he said his friend had a school for veterinaries. And this year they elected only females because they wanted the best, and guys weren't just scoring well. And then he said, and they asked him, why do you think it's that? He said, pornography. It's pornography. It really stops your brain for growing. And maybe somebody will say, I don't watch pornography. 13% of the people are not watching pornography. But we all can, get into lust, into those feelings, because it's very easy to be trapped into it. And it's a very important and moral decision for every one of us to be familiarized with that topic. After the break, I would just like to mention one more thing, Bethany, about another effect is, healthy sexual behavior. And then we will shift towards what is actually the ideal plan that God had and what he meant by creating sex.
So that's the music, and we'll go ahead and head into our last break of the day. If you have a question, go ahead and call it in. On Guam, you can call us at 671-472-1111. That's 671-472-1111. In the CNMI, you can call us at 670-323-1113. That's 670-323-1113. You can also send us a message via text, via WhatsApp or Signal at 671-686-9999. That's 671-686-9999. It's free from the CNMI. Don't go anywhere. Total Health Live will be right back after this break.
When you support Joy FM, it's a bit like playing ping pong. The Bible says, "Give as freely as you have received." When you give to us, we can't help but give back. Like the serve of a ping pong ball, we like to return the blessing. Many of our listeners can't help but feel blessed. That's when they return the blessing in our direction. If you'd like to get in the game, visit joyfmradio.net. Your gifts enable a partnership of blessings to continue.
And we're back with more Total Health. Give us a call with your medical questions. Number to call in Guam is 472-1111. If you're in the CNMI, the number to call is 323-1113. Or you can text or WhatsApp us at 686-9999. Now back to the program.
Hi, and welcome back to Total Health Live. We've only got a couple minutes left of today's show, so let's jump right back in.
Yes, Bethany, before the break, I was talking about another phenomenon or effect that's very prevalent. That's the Coolidge effect. And actually, it comes from the Calvin Coolidge, who was one of the American presidents. And his wife was looking at the neighbors, hands just copulating each other. And she was looking at that and said, what was the secret that, the rooster will not stop, the whole day? Can you tell that secret to my husband? And then the husband answered to the neighbor. He said, is the hen doing that with the same hen? And so that was, a rhetorical question, but actually it meant that the rooster gets more excited when every time, he copulates another hen. And so there is a study that says that in a rat cage, male rats, they certainly go around, have intercourse with all the females. And once they have, all the females several times, they lose interest. Mm-hmm. But their interest gets aroused when another female rat gets dropped into the cage. And all of them had to go through that new female rat, and then they lose interest. And every time there is a new rat, they just, get alive again and start doing what they know how to do well, and until they lose interest again, which shows actually the effect. It's called the Coolidge effect, which shows that apart from God's way of relationship without the oxytocin, when you just rely on the dopamine, actually humans are not better than rats.
Exactly. That's a really great analogy. Humans are no better than rats.
No. When you take the oxytocin away, when you can't have this bonding relationship with one female that you love and cherish and you protect, then of course that's it. No end until you get a new excitement and a new excitement and a new excitement. And it is very sad because, you don't get those excitements every day. You said that's life in Hollywood. You don't have partners every day, and you can't have it. And even if you do, it's not going to lead to anything. It's not going to create a lasting and meaningful relationship, a loving relationship. Because let's face it, life, it's not only that. Life is difficult, life is challenging. Families, if they get married based on that, they can find out themselves very soon that things are not working out. Somebody needs to work, somebody needs to pay the bills, somebody needs to take care of the children. And that absolutely spoils the whole environment if, the couple is not basing their relationship on something stronger than that.
Well, yeah, the foundation crumbles quickly. Right? Because it's building a foundation on sand.
Exactly. And so, Bethany, that wasn't God's design, for human sex. God wants the best for us. And actually, married couples that really work towards loving each other, not experimenting, the best excitement they can have between the sheets, actually, they report that they have better sex, better marriage, better health, and better mental health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, studies actually show that that kind of intimacy once or twice a week actually decreases depression and anxiety.
Right. And if you don't follow those, actually, does it increase anxiety and depression?
Yeah, it really can. Because once again, you don't have that solid foundation, that unshakable platform that all of those appropriate bonding mechanisms have been created for. You don't have that. And so you live in a state of, oh, this can go away at any time. Or if I don't perform in a certain way, then that can shake the foundation. You name it. All of those things
Right.
come into question. There's not that sense of security any longer.
And you're right. And even in the Bible, it says that at the last days, people will lack love. Like the love is somehow fading away. And I can attribute that quite a lot to the pornography, when you're like all the time going after the drive and you put less effort and, even thoughts into deep, serious love relationship, then you just put the love go away. The love is fading when people are more concentrated on the very act than on really building strong relationships. This is what follows.
Yeah, I'm actually curious enough to ask our special guest, in a world that exists and in this kind of toxic environment of what sexuality looks like, how do we avoid that in a world that promotes toxic behavior?
How to avoid it?
Yeah. Practically speaking.
Well, it's really all around you, but to avoid it, I think it just really requires discipline and putting your mind towards other things that can be more important and that uplift you, or that could ultimately uplift your relationship with God or your intimate relationship with one singular person, instead of, like you guys were mentioning earlier, having multiple partners and also using pornography to help have that immediate gratification. But ultimately, I feel like to help relieve that would just focus on one thing or one person that would help with that. Or it could even be something other than a person. It could be something that you like a hobby that you like to do, that you put your time into, that you would put the time that you would watch pornography or the time that you would spend with your other partners, just basically doing better things with your time and having more discipline. Because I feel like when you have individuals who aren't as disciplined and who don't have correct morals, and it just ultimately leads to many people who can't control their emotions. Like you have all these school shootings that are going around, and I think that's ultimately from people, young men and women, who just don't know how to control their emotions, and it all leads back to, or it could all lead back to the use of pornography that could have jump-started it all.
Yeah, with the dysregulation of emotions, what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually appreciate that you kept using the word discipline. And it was something I was thinking about. I always try to ask myself, well, is there an example in the Bible that I can kind of lean on for guidance in a particular area? And so I was kind of thinking about it in this area, where do we see anything that could possibly resemble temptation of that sort? And my thought drifted to Joseph. You remember the story of Joseph, Elena?
Yes.
So he's in, ultimately, he winds up in Pharaoh's house, right? in Egypt, and he's being enticed by the Pharaoh's wife, right? His master's wife. And she's seducing him, right? With all of this, erotic, playing towards his erotic senses. And Joseph chose to respond in a certain way. Do you remember what he said specifically?
Yeah, he said, I cannot cause this evil to my master.
Oh, it wasn't towards his master. He said, how can I do this great thing and sin against God?
Against God, right.
That was the key. It was, he had discipline. He had subjected himself to a life of wanted or unwanted, depends on how you look at those circumstances, discipline. And yeah, he easily could have said, oh, no, I can't do this because, I can't do this to my master. But there was a bigger picture involved, and only discipline could have shown him that. And it was he understood the greater picture of he cannot do this and sin against his God, because in the end, it's all about God, godly character, right? And God has designed and created each one of us for an intimate relationship with a partner, with our treasured individual. He wants that for us. He also wants us to have that in the most perfect possible way possible. And that starts with us valuing each human being as being created in the image of God, just as we are. And so I think Joseph really understood that as a bigger picture. And he's like, wait, this is bigger than just someone playing towards my senses or my sexual nature. This is a bigger picture of how do I respond towards the discipline that God has asked me to establish in my life so that I can reflect his character more.
Yeah, Bethany, what can I say more than that? The story of Joseph describes it all. But I certainly struggle. I'm sure you as well have struggled when mothers come with their kids and they say, hey, can you put them on contraceptives because they're 15 and they already have a sexual life? And I usually tell them, young girls, I promise you're going to have sexual life, for a long time in your life. Why do you start so early? Can you not do that? I don't feel comfortable prescribing you those medications. And some of my nurses are like, Miss Elena, it's none of your business. It's their, life. And if they want to go ahead, you can only support. And I'm like, contraceptives, they do have side effects when you prescribe them at 15 years old. They have dysmorphism of their breasts and other organs struggle. So I do feel uncomfortable when sex starts so early. I do encourage, young people to have the discipline, self-discipline, to respect their bodies, because God has created them, to be temple of God. And God will give you all the pleasure in the world that you have, even imagine about, right, Bethany?
Yeah, 100%. And part of that is trust, right? That's where we get to grow and establish our faith in him, trusting that he does, in fact, have our best interests at heart. If we can only trust that, then we'll be giving the greatest gift to our partner, our eventual partner who he has planned for us. And, it's protecting their integrity as well as our own.
Right. Wait for the right person so God can really multiply the love and all the plans he has designed for you, young people.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you, Bethany. And thank you as well to our anonymous guest. We also want to say thank you to our listeners and those who called in and participated today. Join us again next week, Wednesday, for more Total Health Live.
Be sure to check with your doctors before making any sudden life changes discussed today. Total Health is brought to you in partnership with Guam Seventh-day Adventist Clinic, where health is their mission. We look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. Thank you and Sijuas Masi for listening to Total Health right here on Joy FM.